as the nation split over a rugby tour from apartheid South Africa. Protesters were determined to stop 16 games.
In a moment, we have a rare interview with tobacco giant Philip Morris, which owns Marlboro, the world's biggest selling brand of cigarette. I'll talk to New Zealand spokesman Christopher Bishop.
In New Zealand's rich history of activism, some families stood as pillars of justice, equality and progress. Chris Bishop's lineage is among them. His grandparents were tireless advocates for human rights and racial equality, leaving behind a legacy of courage and conviction. But today that stands in stark contrast to the actions of their grandson, Chris Bishop, who betrayed their legacy. Chris Bishop's grandfather, Reverend Haddon Dixon, was a Methodist minister who dedicated his life to fighting poverty and inequality. As director of Corso, he helped shape the national conscience on issues of global injustice. Dixon's leadership saw Corso evolve from an aid organisation to a platform for activism, taking bold stances against apartheid and systemic racism. He compared Corso's role to movements like HEART, Halt All Racist Tours, and CARE, Citizens Association for Racial Equality, which led New Zealand's fight for racial justice. HEART was a powerful voice in New Zealand's opposition to apartheid. The movement helped rally tens of thousands to the 1981 Springbok Tour protest. During the infamous Dawn raids of the 1970s, CARE organised protests and demanded justice. In one remarkable victory, they convinced the crew of a British cruise ship to refuse to deport Tongan passengers, an act of solidarity and defiance. Under Haddon Dixon's visionary leadership, Corso transformed from a conventional foreign aid organisation into a progressive force for social justice, Māori sovereignty and worker solidarity. Dixon championed the belief that aid must go beyond addressing symptoms of poverty, targeting the systemic inequalities that perpetuate it. This bold shift positioned Corso as a vocal advocate for Māori development and a staunch critic of global neoliberal institutions like the World Trade Organization. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Corso's unwavering commitment to these principles placed it at odds with the prevailing neoliberal political climate. The organization's focus on Māori sovereignty and its rejection of traditional aid paradigms led to public misunderstanding, fueled by media portrayals of Corso as radical and out of step with the mainstream values. This media-fueled backlash resulted in the sharp decline in public support. Bishop's grandmother shared this activist spirit. His grandmother was a progressive socialist. In 1981, she joined the Stop the Tour movement to oppose the Springbok Tour. During a sit-in on the Hutt motorway, she refused to leave, knowing it would lead to her arrest. For her, standing against apartheid was worth any consequence. She proudly completed 200 hours of community service painting the Barnardo Centre, knowing her actions stood on the right side of history. The activist tradition ran strong on Bishop's mother's side. His great-grandfather was a wharfie who stood firm during the 1951 waterfront lockout, enduring hardship to fight for fair wages and better working conditions. The family were lifelong Labour voters, committed to social equity and workers' rights. It was Chris Bishop's mother who unintentionally sent him on a new path to where he is today. She was instrumental in establishing the New Zealand Schools Debating Council, a platform that honed Bishop's skills in rhetoric and persuasion. Bishop thrived in this environment, becoming president of the council for 4 years. This led him to Youth Parliament in 2000, where he represented ACT MP Muriel Newman. Newman, a staunch right-winger, would be Bishop's introduction to the world of right-wing ideology and its global think tank network. She later founded the New Zealand Centre for Political Research, a very anti-Māori and anti-Labour think tank, and an Atlas Network affiliate. After university, Bishop joined the corporate world as a lobbyist for tobacco giant Philip Morris. The company, notorious for its aggressive lobbying, had deep ties to the Atlas Network, a global web of think tanks promoting deregulation and corporate interests. This marked a stark departure from the progressive values of his family. In 2024, he was on the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, the Atlas Network Canadian think tank that David Seymour used to work at. Today, Bishop stands as a key figure in the National Party, pushing legislation like the Fast Track Approvals Bill. The bill prioritises corporate profits over environmental and social safeguards, a move his activist grandparents would have condemned.